For the Concord Chamber Music Society, I'm Anthony Princiotti, inviting you to a stimulating program of music by Beethoven, Yehudi Weiner, Alexander von Zemlinsky, and Paul Schoenfield, performed by the Concord Chamber Players, Thomas Martin, clarinet, Wendy Putnam, violin, Michael Reynolds, cello, and Vitas Bakshish, piano. Sunday, January 29th at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center. The program begins with Yehudi Weiner's Tanz und Missoula, a two-movement work for clarinet, violin, cello, and piano that Weiner wrote in 1981 as an homage to his father, the distinguished composer of Yiddish art songs, Lazar Weiner. These pieces, whose English titles are Dance and Little Story, were inspired by piano preludes with the same names the elder composer wrote for his son when he was 2 years old. Although Weiner has written many works that were inspired by Jewish history and culture, reflected here through his use of characteristic klezmer instruments like the clarinet and the violin, this influence is mostly abstracted in the opening piece, as conventional Hasidic dance rhythms are transformed into alternating expressions of mystery and sudden rage. The following little story is more idiomatic, the main theme hearkening back to the melancholy atmosphere of the more contemplative forms of Eastern European folk music Weiner associated with his father, a native of the Ukraine. Tanz und Missoula is a nostalgic reciprocal musical dedication, a gesture Yehudi Weiner would come to remember wistfully. These were the last of his new compositions his father heard before his death in 1982. Next, we'll hear Beethoven's extraordinary Sonata No. 9 for violin and piano, dedicated to Rudolf Kreutzer, one of the great violinists of Beethoven's day. It was written in 1803, at the beginning of Beethoven's middle period, a creative stretch lasting roughly 12 years during which his music not only became more powerful and distinctive, but also permanently altered the genres in which he was writing. And in this case, Beethoven wrote a violin sonata of unprecedented length, rhetorical power, and mutual virtuosity. The first movement reveals a composer who, at the relatively young age of 32, is both already at the height of his powers and fully in possession of the artistic identity that would make him such a singular figure in the history of music. The writing is both epic and compact, as, without wasting a note, Beethoven sustains a sense of dramatic fury over the movement's extraordinary length by deploying and developing musical materials of almost startling simplicity. The second movement brings with it a complete change in tone, as the first movement's manic energy now yields to music of prevailing graciousness. Beethoven was an unsurpassed master of the variation form, and here he takes a delicate, courtly theme through a series of increasingly florid variations before returning to the tranquility of the beginning. Whereas the first movement articulates a fiery, romantic sensibility, this lovely andante reminds us of Beethoven's late 18th century roots and the atmospheric symmetry that was such a high aesthetic value of that era. The massive piano chord that interrupts the afterglow of the second movement serves to galvanize us for the rambunctious energy of the finale. This movement is a tarantella, the Italian dance with a legendary medical purpose to enable the victim of a venomous spider bite to cheat death by remaining in constant motion. The stream of hopping rhythms and fast notes that characterize this dance reflect the imagery the myth evokes, and while the finale of this sonata is as formidable as its opening movement, its character is more about the joys of sheer velocity than about dramatic intensity, providing a bookend for this sonata that is at once appropriately substantial and leavening. After an intermission, we'll hear a performance of the Austrian composer Alexander von Zemlinsky's trio for clarinet, cello, and piano. Largely unknown today, Zemlinsky's work had a far-reaching impact on 20th century music, bridging the gap between the conservative and progressive elements of his time. While the great traditionalist Brahms was a formative influence on his own music, Zemlinsky would become the musical godfather for the much more radically disposed composers of the so-called Second Viennese School, composers such as Schoenberg, Webern, and Berg, who would spend the first half of the 20th century inverting norms of musical language that had existed for millennia. Yet in spite of his fertile open-mindedness, Zemlinsky's output, which includes symphonies, operas, chamber music, and song cycles, retained a conservatism that would be increasingly out of step with advancing musical developments. Zemlinsky's clarinet trio was written in 1896 as an entry in a competition established by the Vienna Society of Musicians. Brahms was to sit on the competition's jury, which may have motivated Zemlinsky both artistically and politically. The older composer, who would die a year later, had come out of retirement in the early 1890s, his inspiration rekindled by his acquaintance with the clarinet virtuoso Richard Mühlfeld. The result was 4 pieces of chamber music featuring the clarinet, including a trio, a quintet, and 2 sonatas. Brahms' clarinet writing shows not only an awareness of the instrument's technical and expressive potential, he heard a quality in the instrument's timbre that could convey the feelings of nostalgia and longing that marked his interior life during his final years. Zemlinsky was well acquainted with these works, and their echoes are heard throughout his own clarinet trio, in the clearly laid-out structure of the first movement, the dreamy, radiant textures of the clarinet writing in the slow movement, and the conclusion of the trio with a Hungarian Zengerese rondo of the sort Brahms composed to end his beloved first piano quartet, a tribute that caps off Zemlinsky's trio in an equally satisfying manner. The program concludes with the American composer Paul Schoenfield's riotously appealing trio for clarinet, cello, and piano. Schoenfield's works have been influenced by a wide range of popular styles, with Hasidic music as a primary source. This trio from 1990 is intended to be broadly appealing enough for performance at both Hasidic celebrations and chamber music concerts, with klezmer elements dominating the 4 movements. The opening Freilach is a frenetic, abstracted version of a dance that's frequently played at Simchas, festive occasions. The middle movements are studies in contrast. A bizarre, diabolical march parodies the ceremonial music played at important Hasidic court functions, while the third movement, titled Nigun, Hebrew for tune or wordless melody, reflects the mysticism and deep spirituality of lyric Hasidic music. The final movement is a kozatska, a Russian Cossack dance Eastern European Jews adopted for wedding celebrations. Again, Schoenfield takes the dance as a point of departure for creating a wide variety of expression and musical atmospheres. And yet he never strays too far from the wild, boisterous character of the original, providing the players with a virtuosic tour de force that concludes the trio and this program in high spirits. So please join us Sunday, January 29th at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center as the Concord Chamber Music Society presents the Concord Chamber Players in what will certainly be an engaging musical event. For the Concord Chamber Music Society, I'm Anthony Princiotti.